Okay, let's see if we get this speaker working. So, God, isn't this just great? We got a full house in the room and we got 3 live speakers here. So tomorrow, I think my M&A panel is going to have everybody remote, but we'll still have a lot of fun. So usually the way we start this off is we go and give about a 2-minute introduction of your, professional and educational background. And if you have something interesting in your family background, that's great. Astronaut, Navy SEAL, maybe some kids that have been, Olympic medalist, maybe a wife that you've known since high school, like mine, whatever it is. So I'm gonna take a prerogative and start from left to right with lasagna. I'm gonna say lasagna. Lasagna. I tell you, I had a really lot of fun at the JP Morgan conference. Probably too much fun, but
It's actually Lorenzo.
I'm gonna have to pronounce that. I think my tongue's
Lorenzo.
getting twisted. Lorenzo. Yeah. Thank you.
So my background, most of my life, I've been inventing things, but a lot of them are around valuation. So the first valuation product that I created was the #1 selling small business valuation tool back when there was packaged software. So it was in Kmart, it was in Staples, it was, Inc. magazine. So, and then subsequent to that, I also created some stuff around security. So for using social media to detect credit card fraud back around 2006. And then also valuation tools for venture capital. So the first automated tool to value portfolio companies in 2000, also released in 2006, which was a patented technology. So it's used to value the first investors in Twitter, Facebook, pretty much all your first unicorns was used to value those companies. So that's primarily my background. I also had a book published by John Wiley and Sons called Venture Capital Valuation back in 2011.
Okay, so this one's a little easier. Bernard, look, I'm getting better now. I think that espresso helped me.
Gary, it's good to see you again. It's
Yeah.
been many years. I also want to thank Marty and IvyFON for the invitation. My name is Bernard Slede. The program calls me Senior VP of Business Development without any further detail, so I'm going to provide some more detail. I am indeed Senior VP of Business Development for an AI company called AI Redefined, which is venture-backed by Silicon Valley VCs and the defense company Thales. But I also am an AI investor. I have been for 10 years. I invested in Bootstrap Labs, which is a local applied AI VC fund that started investing in AI 10 years ago. And so I have some familiarity with the space. And I also invest in startups as an angel investor, including a number of Y Combinator companies. So I'm not a Navy SEAL and I'm not an astronaut, but if you're looking for an interesting tidbit or anecdote, I was invited to the White House for the launch of Startup America back in 2011. And at the time, I was at corporate VC at HP, and I had launched HP Startup Central. So effectively reconnecting the original garage company with the startup ecosystem. And I've also advised a large number of SaaS companies and tech companies over the years, including many Canadian companies. I was for 4 years in a row at the Silicon Valley Advisor for the Canadian Technology Accelerator Program. So stop there.
Thank Great. You. Okay, Jason.
Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Marty, for the opportunity to present today. Yeah, my name is Jason Barbour, and my background is really in artificial intelligence and machine learning, going back actually about 25 years. I did a PhD at UCSF here in the city in bioinformatics and have been applying machine learning and AI into biotechnology and specifically into therapeutics development really all of that time. Today, I sort of wear 2 hats. One, I'm a founder along with Frank here in the front row of something called Synkrino Development Company, or SDC, which is an innovative data-driven direct-to-asset therapeutics development and financing platform. Frank's going to be talking about that at length in the next session. The other hat I wear is that I help build generative AI stacks, mostly for therapeutics companies. It's a really interesting point in time because there's been this great advancement in AI has actually led to a real democratization and access to these tools, and in particular foundational models. So I help existing therapeutics companies really get up to speed in terms of building generative AI stacks to be able to advance discovery and development. And then the last one, an interesting tidbit. I was thinking about this. In my deep genealogy, I am related through my mother to the Starbuck family from the whaling family that was featured in Moby Dick. So that is an actual fact.
Well, that's a great one. I can't top that one. I can't top that one. So my name is Gary Sawka, and we've been doing these with Marty since, I don't know, 10 years ago, at least 10 years ago. And what happens is that I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm on a company that Incutel funded, which is a CAI's venture capital company. They say I've got the most authentic LinkedIn profile they had screened. And I'm also getting at this conference a lot of hits. I don't know if it's because they are all desperados looking for me to give them funding, or maybe it's the fact that I'm worldwide famous from being the class secretary of my Harvard Business School notes. And now we got a big blog on the USC Trojan football season, which is not too good. Yeah. And a pickleball court in my house. I actually got a very well-known law firm that's now wanting to use my pickleball court. They gave me about 20 hours of $1,000 an hour advice on M&A, which we'll use tomorrow. So I got that. But anyways, everything is great here. Guys, I think that when I look at Deeptech, I look at the volatility. You know, there's a company, I hope I pronounce it right, but it's IonQ, IONQ. And it was sitting around $60 until a neighbor of mine, who's actually about 5 minutes away, although I don't think we know each other, Jason Wang, said, I think quantum computing is 30 years off. And then he looks at the CFO, he says, 50 years. And so that company took a deep dive, and from something like 60 to 30, it's recovered a few dollars today. But there's so much volatility. And so I guess when I look at this, there's, you know, they say the principal thing is technical risk, but then there's also market risk. But when you guys look at an opportunity, I mean, the last presentation on Innovits and Deep Vein from both, pretty easy to understand, right? But some of these things you just don't understand. So how do you get your hands around any of these things? And how do you think about evaluation unless you have just a lot of gambling chips and stuff? So why don't we start again with Lorenzo? Look at now, I'm getting better. Getting better. I'm gonna
Thanks,
go.
Gary. This is just my personal hypothesis, but I believe that AI today, even the word itself, it doesn't mean what it meant 5 years ago. I mean, we used to spend years paying a lot of money building models. You don't have to do that anymore. So the real volatility is the companies that are not adopting AI aggressively. And you'd be shocked, given how much it can do today, that there's a ton of companies on that list, publicly traded companies, that literally should be betting the bank on exactly what's going to happen to a couple things. One, because the short-term impact on tech companies, all tech companies, is less personnel, okay? So, but once you start squeezing all the personnel out, then basically, where's your consumer demand come from? And that's not that far into the future to actually start thinking about. Like, EBITDA goes up short-term because people's costs are going down, right? But a lot of software companies, like a lot of your returns have been in the internet space. I mean, I love like biotechnology companies, life sciences companies, not just because they make a difference, but they're usually the smarter people. I mean, they all have PhDs. They've been doing this for like who knows how many years. They struggled to get VC funding compared to internet companies. Why? Because the return cycle, I mean, it's so long. People have grandchildren by the time, the product's adopted. And so, now we're kind of flipping around because those like clever tech companies, they're going to be dead. I mean, they are, because if you have a clever idea, you can speak that into existence now, right? So I think the volatility isn't the real AI companies, because you can assess what they're doing now just by like using the product if you have any kind of domain expertise. And so the other companies are going to have greater volatility.
I just want to make one comment on Lorenzo's comment, which is that, banking went through a long era of offshoring jobs, which most of those offshore jobs will be gone because AI is going to get rid of them. But when they offshored all those jobs, they fired a lot of people. Like, a bank that won't be named laid off 60,000 people in the United States and sent the jobs to India, the Philippines, and Costa Rica. And but those were 60,000 people who were evangelists for the product, right? They say, "Oh, you should use my bank," right? Yeah. And that's a big question, and that is going to happen with AI as well, of all the job losses. So,
Well, Meta keeps cutting guys. They're saving $2 to $3 billion just by getting rid of their fact checkers. So maybe it's not the only reason why they are getting rid of fact checkers, but now I think they're talking about getting rid of coders. So I don't know what the unemployment rate in India is, but also take a look at HB1 visas. I mean, how many coders came to the United States? Not only the coders, but the grandparents to take care of the kids, and the wives are also on the HB1 visas, because we know a lot of those. So yeah, it's going to change the whole industry, and but I think when you look at it, it's more large language models. The way I'm seeing it is much more effective at discrete tasks that are very common, and that coding something out, maybe not as big. So Bernard, when you talk about that, where do you see it? Do you see it getting into really doing predictions and stuff like that, or?
Yeah, so on the topic of the Deeptech waves, there was a lot of hope around Web3 and crypto, and we see how the market has responded so far, which is not necessarily widespread adoption. With AI, I completely agree with Lorenzo. It's happening. It's happening now. It's probably going to be happening faster, and I'll be glad to give some examples. There's also a lot of hope around quantum. And to your point, we don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's 50 years, 10 years, or maybe next year. Google made an announcement at the end of last year that made a big splash. But is it market reality, or when is it going to be market reality? I don't know. It's quite possible so that Jensen Huang, when he made that statement, tried to preempt interest in competing companies. And so I would not necessarily read too much into it. He's not a quantum guru, and neither am I. And so he's probably partly right. And then there's also a lot of expectation around fusion. If you're talking about Deeptech, same thing. There's a lot of interest, a lot of announcements. When is it going to be real? So to your earlier question, it really depends on when the technology is actually working. With AI, it is working. And LLM models are an interesting area because of the foundational model and the enormous amounts of money that have been poured into the field, frankly, reserved to a small number of companies, and actually a smaller number of companies as months go by. I think companies like Mistral and others are throwing in the towel because they realize that they can't invest tens of billions of dollars every month to effectively develop these new models and create the infrastructure that's required. But to Lorenzo's point, there is I think a widespread adoption of AI that's coming in 2025. And more specifically, I think 2024 was the year of LLMs. 2025 is widely seen as being the year of agentic AI. And just to clarify what it means and give an example, with agentic AI, you're not just giving a single prompt to ChatGPT or Claude and saying, how do I do this? get one response back. You can actually structure a string of commands, including parallel commands and prompts, and arrange them into an orchestrated workflow, and effectively start augmenting humans in a much more meaningful way. I'm currently working with a company that does this for product management. And so you provide a product management copilot, and the product management copilot will run competitive analyses in real time in the background, will create product requirements documents, will quantify the time required to develop the next feature, and do all that in real time as an augmentation of your existing team. So you can now, your team of 5 or 20 product management professionals can now do the work of 50 or 100 and do it much faster. And so that is the velocity of business is going to be a competitive advantage. It already is, but with AI, it's magnified. And I think Lorenzo's point is absolutely right, that if you're not hopping on the AI train practically, and I'm not talking about LLMs, I'm talking about practical implementations that impact your operations. You might be on the disruption train going the other way in the next few years.
Yeah. So before we get on to Jason, I guess one of the biggest issues people say is that there's AI bias. Okay, but I'd also like to explore something else, and that is that when do you not look at the AI bias and you just observe what's going on in the world? And this may be a political comment, so hopefully Marty won't get buzzed out. But before the election, one of my friends calls me up, and typical San Francisco liberal, he says, Gary.
Is there a question here?
Yeah. He says, you're the only Republican I know. He says, do you want to bet on the election? He says, because all my friends, they all just know Kamala's going to win. So I says, yeah, I'll bet on you. I'll bet on you. He says, how much? He says, $1,000. I says, okay. I says, how about, what will you give me if Trump carries all 7 swing states? He says, 10-1. Wow. I says, that's not bad. For $1,000, I might make 10. I says, but are you going to go to Canada and then pay me in loonies? He says, no, Gary, you know, I've known you for 40 years. I'll pay you. And so sure enough, he did pay me. He did pay me, and he did pay me in US currency, no Bitcoin or loonies or pesos or whatever. So he got it. So what happened? So I travel in a different group of people that he does. So when do you look at the bias and say, I'm going to make my own decisions? Going down the street and say, this is got a bias that's involved in the model. And how much discrete tasks are one thing, but how about the broader issues about where you have it? And you certainly saw that.
I think that comes down to how you think about adopting AI.
Yeah.
To either your organization or your individual work. And we've been using the word agentic AI here today. And that means that you can actually give a piece of software some responsibilities to go out and work on a problem and come back with a proposed solution, maybe even log into a website, order something. But that is different from what I think you're describing, which is artificial general intelligence, which is something that would come back with general opinions or general impressions of the world, something that really is meant to mimic human intelligence. And there the bias question becomes real, because then it becomes a question of what was the AI trained on? What kind of data does it have access to? And how good is it at going out and updating the information that it has and verifying it? We're not at AGI yet, in my view. I think we're a couple of years away, maybe 3 to 5. But what we are on the verge of is, as these two gentlemen have pointed out, is agentic AI, which is being able to have basically an autonomous intelligence system, not a general intelligence, go out and do things for you. Give you a couple of examples from my work. So we build generative AI stacks that go and design new protein therapeutics. And so these models are able to explore spaces that are well beyond what any human or human team could explore in any reasonable period of time. But it's also well beyond what the compute systems could do even 2 or 3 years ago. So the degree of progress they can make is extraordinary. We were talking a bit about clinical trials and specialized applications. Another major area is that artificial intelligence, agentic approaches can help file, structure, and monitor the results of clinical trial systems. And that's going to have multiple impacts. It can help navigate very complex regulatory environments. It can help with reporting requirements. It can help with design requirements. It will almost certainly reduce payrolls. And it could really significantly advance progress of some therapeutics through trials. So I think, when the first internet sort of compute revolution played out about 25 years ago, we all had access to Google. We all saw this play out in real time. This is sort of happening to some extent behind closed doors for the organizations that provide us services. So if you're interacting with really any large tech company, there's an enormous amount of agentic AI and AI adoption happening behind the scenes. So it is happening on scale, but it's not as visible, I think, as the revolution 25 years ago was.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to add on a slightly different note. Last year, there was a lot of talk and probably angst around the concept of hallucination, where you ask a question and ChatGPT gives you, in an authoritative manner, an answer which is completely false. The AI world has been working hard to reduce, mitigate, in some cases eliminate that through techniques such as RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, which is effectively seeking the truth in an existing repository. And so it's not, the LM is not making up something, it's seeking the answer. There are, Jason just mentioned agents that can do QA, quality assurance. That's something else you can use to mitigate that. So it is not the problem is not solved, but it is not where it was a year ago. And so this concept of bias and hallucinations is being addressed.
So last year at the Bitcoin, somebody made the comment that all this Bitcoin mining as they have would cause us to use more energy than the entire country of Japan. And Japan, just from the signs in Tokyo, is using a lot of energy. But now all of a sudden we've got this huge demand for energy and hardware resources. And of course, natural gas was just completely politically incorrect. And all of a sudden now natural gas is even in Europe, right? Except for the gas heaters that the Biden administration wants to ban. But, I really love my gas heater, especially when the electric goes off. But so what do you think about this huge demand just for resources, the dollars there? Does the enterprise infrastructure, is it sort of a strategic differentiator that somebody can use and optimize, just like they optimize the phone? Eventually there'll be 1,000-mile EV battery and stuff. Are they going to be working on that to reduce the amount of energy consumed by AI queries and large language models? Because that's got to be a big deal in terms of how much you pay for the energy.
Well, I think what's really interesting is you hit on a very important point. And these two things I think are closely related. Blockchain adoption, as Bernard said, it has not been what we thought it would be. But if you look at the price, most people are in it for capital appreciation. So really, if you look at what Bitcoin originally did, which is basically just the internet of value, basically sending value from one person to another person, that is still the primary use case, along with capital appreciation. So as long as it's appreciating more than any other asset in the history of the world, which it has, no, seriously. So the first time when I came up and talked to Marty about Bitcoin, well, actually I was talking more about Ethereum because we were developing smart contracts. At the time, I think Ethereum was $20, and basically every place that I spoke, I'm like, buy Ethereum, just buy Ethereum. Why? Because you can program it, and you couldn't program Bitcoin at the time. Now you can't, but it takes a ton of energy. And then if you look at your AI companies, so OpenAI, basically they were raising capital to get a nuclear power plant. Who are they competing with for that plant? Bitcoin companies, Facebook is getting one. So basically we'll see construction of more, which I consider relatively safe, and efficient energy. But over time, I think you're going to get to this place where the AI is the energy. I mean, it is like oil. Because right now, if you look at how it's priced, and you look at how oil was priced when it was first introduced, there weren't that many use cases. You had to refine it to get it to do anything like crude, right? So there was all this infrastructure you had to build around it. So there's price discovery happening in a really, no pun intended, crude way, right? Now, you don't have to have that because the use cases, they approach infinity. So as long as you can put a price on what you substituted with that energy that you just spent, then it's a very simple equation, right? So basically, right now, it's substantially underpriced. So really, if you want to look at something, I'd look at like the AI providers as providing energy. And they're a small part of their actual cost of goods sold will be actually the plants that they're using to deliver that product. So, because if you have 1,000 people working for you that have advanced degrees, and you can replace all except the top 10% of them, just the present value of that is pretty substantial, And then if I can deliver that service to you at even 50%, you're better off, right? But if I'm the one delivering it, then I'm setting the price. So right now, really, if you look at the actual price for AI, you should expect to see that go up. And I would say that, dramatically.
The new OpenAI tool, the new ChatGPT models that are $200 a month.
Right.
So at OpenAI there have been a number of estimates that have come out at the actual cost for them to provide that is 800.
Mm-hmm.
And that's driven by compute. That's driven by time in building the models and time in making inference calls off the models. Now that's a calculated decision on their part.
Well, it's capital acquisition, it's customer acquisition cost.
Absolutely.
That's nothing. Because if I pay $10,000, $100,000, right, to get somebody that's worth basically, $10 million lifetime value or even more, then you can do that all day long. More importantly, unlike other customer acquisition experiments, you're not just getting customer fit. You're actually improving your product in real time just by them interacting with it.
There's one big technical point about energy consumption in AI that maybe Bernard can comment on as well, is that it costs a lot more to train the model than it does to ask it questions. So there's training time, which can be in the hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for a single model. But inference calls, meaning asking the trained model question, is actually a lot lower. It can be in the hundreds to thousands to do it. And that also shows up in energy. So how companies manage those two tasks, training versus inference, I think will have a big impact on their overall cost structure and their ability to price it competitively.
Yeah, and to go back to your question, Gary, on the energy impact, there's a discussion as to whether we're at a Cisco moment in history, and I'm referring to the 2000 Cisco, where everybody was over investing in the buildup of internet infrastructure, and then 2001, 2002 came, and everybody had too much inventory. Cisco's price crashed, and the whole telecom market actually crashed at the time. So are we at that kind of moment where people are overly optimistic and overly investing in infrastructure, buying data center capacity, buying power capacity, Microsoft revving up the second generator or second plant at 3 Mile Island and so forth. We don't know. I think there's a school of thought that says that there's no limit to how you can train those models, and there's an infinite number of tasks, human tasks that can be augmented, that can augment humans or replace human tasks, that can be done through generative AI, and therefore the sky's the limit, and let's invest ahead of that. That's the school of thought that you read about in the media and in the AI ecosystem. There's another school of thought that says that perhaps there are major productivity gains and cost savings that could be derived from using smaller models. There's such a thing as a small language models that it doesn't get as much press because the numbers are not as extraordinary. But for many things, you could actually do a specialized model that will work more effectively, more cost effectively, and won't consume as much energy. And so. And also, agentic AI is not all inference and consumption of energy. There are ways you can orchestrate a workflow that is not as energy hungry. And so I don't know which of the two it is. All I know is that as an investor at my scale, I don't worry too much about the cost of energy, because it's really about what is the cost of the tokens. In other words, the units of consumption of AI that startups and other companies that we look at for investment purposes have to face.
Yeah, so before we, Marty just said we should start a lightning round, but before that, there's, I think, an important question. For you guys who've watched the World War II movies, the British, with the help of the Polish, broke the encryption on the German, machines, and helped tremendously in the war. The same thing with the Japanese, encryption was broken. So one of the things I hear a lot about is that quantum computing, and whether it's 30 years or 50 years or a year from now, will likely pose a severe threat to today's encryption practices. And I think the Chinese especially are way, way ahead of us on that. So updating that is probably more urgent than ever. So in terms of a national security, I guess a little longer than the lightning round answer, what do you guys think of in terms of that encryption, and it's really a threat to security of the country?
If it's ever realized, there's a timeline. Because people have been pursuing it for quite some time. AI was probably going to help them get there faster. And then, we'll develop new ways of protecting data. A lot of it's funny because a lot of the encryption people, are recruited by the NSA, like right out of school. And a lot of those people have started Bitcoin funds,
Yeah.
No, seriously, I know, actually a couple of people speaking on Marty's panels that, basically they put half the family fund in a Bitcoin, when it was
It's ridiculous.
yeah. And basically, it's crazy. The return that they had. But anyway, that's kind of off topic.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah.
One of the most successful Bitcoin investors was a guy who put all of his bar mitzvah money into Bitcoin when it was around $50, and he did pretty well.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, so quantum is a topic for DoD, and it may not be on the VC and angel investors top of mind investment themes, but it is a topic for the DoD, and they are interested in understanding and researching that. I can tell you that having talked to a post-quantum encryption or cryptography company, that raising money is proven to be challenging because, in particular, because of Jensen Huang and those kinds of naysayers who say that this will happen, later in our lifetime or afterwards. And I think to your point, the Chinese may be developing technology that's more advanced. As an investment theme, it's not clear if the market is ready, but the market is definitely going to be ready for encryption and cryptography that is more AI resistant.
Jason, any comments?
Yeah, I think I agree with Lorenzo and with Bernard. Quantum and fusion are both going to happen. How far out they are, it's not clear. I would say probably at least 10 years, probably beyond that. AI is going to help speed up both in terms of making those accessible technologies. By the time we get there, and I think this was Lorenzo's point, we will have new advanced encryption technologies to be able to be compatible with quantum. But there will be an intermediate period where if another group or another country leaps ahead of us in quantum, yes, then we could be left exposed on our encryption protocols.
Yeah, and when that happens, we can throw away all the security protection and security vendor solutions because they will be completely ineffective. And that day, the prospect of that day is extremely scary.
Yeah, that's right. So now for the lightning round, okay? So I guess the first thing is how about the audience? We got a great attendance. Anybody have any questions that you want to ask? And then we go 1 through 3 like that, or anybody here?
The national grid going to keep up with AI and
Well, there's
Nuclear.
well, I think unlike providing energy for people's homes, a lot of data centers are being created in other countries where, you can provide the power at a lower cost and you can start all those plants new. And also the regulatory environment gives you like jurisdiction shopping advantages. So I think short term or even intermediate term, that's an option, because you don't need proximity. Right.
Anyway, thank you. That's a good answer. I mean, we ship data, we don't ship electricity around the world.
Right.
Yeah, so there are a number of infrastructure solutions that are being developed and invested in. Some are about the making the grid more robust. Some are about spinning up new power plants. There are smaller power plant. There is smaller power plant technology that is being developed, including I believe in nuclear with a nuclear approach. As Gary mentioned, the U.S. is extremely rich in gas reserves, and we can expect that with the new administration, there will be fewer restrictions on mining the gas, if you will, and extracting the gas and processing it to power existing power plants. And that question is also probably the topic of energy is probably also behind geopolitical considerations. As you know, Canada is extremely rich in hydropower. And the climate is very favorable to data center cooling. So there are different ways to start addressing the problem, and it's being addressed. As I mentioned earlier, Microsoft signed a contract with 3 Mile Island for the other reactor, and who would have thought?
Anybody? Okay, what? Go ahead.
So some people like Kevin O'Leary has talked about sustainable Bitcoin mining and having like only buying Bitcoin that was like is that just like a marketing thing, or is that
I can speak to only one item with respect to it. I mean, the buyers aren't gonna. I don't think they have the ability to differentiate like who mined it, like what energy resources did they use to get there. But we know there's been people that like in the Permian Basin who have been using, and you've heard these stories, like a lot of these ventures failed, but some of them have succeeded. In part because they're very sensitive to changes in Bitcoin's price. So, so it can start off looking very ugly, but they'll take the waste, and get rid of the water, which is an issue in like the oil business. And then they will actually use the burn off instead of seeing flames come out to actually power, basically a generator that's running, basically mining machines, So, and then there were a couple of publicly traded companies that were like, they could tell you that 100% of their mining was green. The problem is, if you look at publicly traded Bitcoin, mining, it doesn't really work out, because you're better off just buying Bitcoin. So, but I don't know if that's an answer, but it's a perspective.
Other one?
What about the world of
unintended consequences. Like, you're an AI. Do you spend time being concerned about that for your generation of children?
Yeah. So we're talking about AI agents a lot, and what we're talking about is giving an autonomous non-human intelligence access to APIs. In other words, the ability to go out on the internet and log into websites and conduct transactions. So that could start with something as simple as having a LinkedIn account, but it also means being able to create a banking account, potentially arbitrage. No, we'd be doing it in your name because we don't give personhood yet to AI. But I think we do have to think carefully about what it means to allow these agents to take actions on our behalf going forward. There's no question that it's going to be able in its first iteration to solve all manner of problems for us. But there is the potential for them to take actions that we didn't authorize or that we didn't want. So I know, but I also know that people at Anthropic and people at OpenAI and other companies have seen this problem coming for some time and are working very hard on it. But yeah, I think it's something that has to be part of any integrated generative AI strategy is to consider that.
Yeah, I would say three quick things. The first one is that unfortunately we can't really regulate or stop technological progress. And so your question is how do we mitigate or counter potential negative consequences? There are a number of groups around ethical AI, responsible AI that have been formed in Canada. There's Mila and other groups in the Montreal AI community. Same in San Francisco. So there is a movement, but not everybody adheres to it, and it's not forced. Right? It's voluntary. Then the other consideration is that every positive attribute of AI or implementation of AI has a dark version. So a number of years ago, I attended a panel with two cybersecurity folks who said that at some point, this was in 2017, you could imagine a malicious AI agent trying to co-opt a beneficial AI agent. And it goes back partly to the topic of security, but it goes in specifically to the topic of training the models and influencing the models and what sort of safeguards are put in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. I think it's a topic, it's an open question. And then there's a societal aspect of your question, which Jason alluded to, which is if you're 18 years old today or 16 years old today, what kind of career do you pick that's still going to be around in 5 years?
So my prediction is that the world is not getting necessarily better. So as long as there's potholes on the street, AI is not really accomplishing much. So listen, guys, thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.